Hi again, everyone. My name is Shani, and welcome to Transform to One's webinar on mental health in children ages 0 to 12. I am going to be the host for today, and I will be guiding us through the session. Also assisting me in today's webinar are two of our team members, Aisha, as well as Judith Phillips, who will be assisting us in the chat. Today's webinar is geared towards, as the topic said, adults who work or parent children ages 0 to 12, and specifically those who were affected by Hurricane Melissa. And as Aisha prayed, it doesn't have to be persons who are directly impacted, because, for example, we live on the eastern side of Jamaica, but we hail from Westmoreland. And so after the hurricane, when we went down, my son, who's 10 years old, came, saw the damage, and was definitely impacted by what he saw at the time. His concern is about the future and the well-being of his grandparents, who, he saw the devastation of the home. And that impacted him, even though he didn't experience the hurricane at all. And so the magnitude may be different, the type of trauma may be different, but all across the island persons were affected. And we at Transform to One are here to offer our support in helping the children through the adults navigate and transition through the period. Hurricane Melissa was 7 months ago, and in many ways, things actually haven't returned to normal. But we're hoping to help to give tools and equipping so that persons, parents, teachers, social workers, guidance counselors can all support their children in various ways. And I am now going to hand over to Aisha to introduce our first presenter for today.
Our first speaker is Mrs. Nevin White. She has served as a guidance counselor for the past 3 years. She currently works as a guidance counselor at PGA Preparatory School and teaches health and family life education at Junior World Learning and Activity Center. Nevin holds a degree in guidance and counseling and a certification in play therapy. During the summer months, she volunteers as a workshop speaker, providing support and guidance to parents. Through her church organization, she also visits and assists families in need within the community. Nevin primarily works with primary school children and has a special interest in supporting those experiencing emotional and behavioral challenges through play-based therapeutic approaches. She is passionate about supporting the emotional and mental well-being of children and families, and is committed to helping parents, educators, and caregivers better understand and respond to the needs of young people. I will hand over to Nevin White now.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for that introduction, Aisha. Today, I want to say it is indeed such a wonderful day. Thank you for all those who are joining us for this important conversation, conquering the impact of Hurricane Melissa. We are truly grateful that you are with us, to spend the time with us just to look into this topic. I'm going to share my screen, so just give me just a few seconds. Let me get to that. I have an activity for us to participate in as we seek to get into the presentation. The title of our icebreaker for today is Through a Child's Eyes. And I want each and every one just to take a moment and step into a child's world. Think about a child you know. It could be your own child, it could be a niece or a nephew or a child you have in your care between ages 0 to 12. So start thinking. Now imagine that child experiencing Hurricane Melissa. Imagine what they might have seen, heard, and felt. I want for us to use one word, and I'm going to ask you to type in the chat. What do you think that child felt most strongly during that experience? So just quickly, just give me your responses.
So it's fear, afraid, terrified, trauma, worry, anxiety, nervous,
All right, thank you so much for sharing. What we can see from these responses is that children are not just experiencing the physical impact of the hurricane, they are carrying deep emotional experiences as well. So we hear about fear. And I just quickly jotted them down. We heard fear. We heard being afraid, being terrified, being traumatized, being anxious and nervous. And so one of the things that we know, and often enough, children do not have the words to express those feelings. And that's where we come in. Today, we'll be looking at how to recognize those hidden emotions, like what you have listed here, and how to respond in ways that actually will truly support our children's healing. So thank you so much for sharing those. And at the end of it, we'll come back to, to wrap up this activity. But now we're just going to go right into the presentation. And today we'll be focusing on our children, how they have been affected, how to recognize when they are struggling, because some of our children might still be struggling. And most importantly, how we as adults, and we're thinking of parents who might be online, caregivers, counselors, community leaders, how we can support them in a meaningful way during this time of healing, during this time of recovery. So for this presentation, the session will focus on practical, everyday support. It's not clinical therapy, because I want you to take away something. I want you to have something to go with to help, our children. And so we're giving you the practical, everyday support to help and this is to help adults in children's lives respond with confidence and compassion. So by the end of the presentation, you should feel a little bit more confident. And I'm thinking of 3 areas. First, have an understanding of the impact, just recognize how traumatic events like Hurricane Melissa has affected children in Western Jamaica. Not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically too, all right? And secondly, to recognize distress, and we're gonna be looking at identify the signs of trauma in children ages 0 to 12 years. And thirdly, we're gonna be looking at how do we provide, emotional first aid. And it's just a matter of learning simple, practical ways to offer immediate, compassionate support to our children. So at the end of that, what we hope to, to get from it, and I hope that all of us will walk away with something from it. So because even in putting together this presentation, I was just so encouraged because I was learning again, relearning. And some things were even new to me as I seek to research. So at the end of it, I want us to have the confidence to feel equipped to, support our children, our children's recovery every day. So this is not about being a therapist. It's about becoming more aware, becoming more responsive and supportive in your everyday interactions with the children. So whether it is that you're a parent, whether you are in the schools, that could be a teacher, a counselor, or a worker in the schools, or you are in the community, you're a pastor for a church, or you work in other areas in the community. This is for you, and this is also for you to have that confidence to help our children as we go through the recovery process and as we go to this place called healing. All right, so what is childhood trauma? And we hear the word all the time, so we're going to just dive into it a bit. So trauma is a child's emotional response to overwhelming events. It's not just the event itself, it's basically, how the child experiences it. So trauma happens when a child feels overwhelmed, when they feel unsafe, or they're unable to cope with what is happening around them. So when we think of what would have happened in the western end of the island, we think that, our children, their safety was disrupted in that they actually lose so much, they lose their sense of physical and emotional security, routine, and we'll go a bit more into it as we go along. Routine was disrupted, familiar structures that provided comfort are suddenly gone. And that's something that, they had to deal with. Their family stability was disrupted. Stress was on caregivers, and it rippled. There was a rippling effect, because it actually went down to, affecting the well-being of our children. And so our children were in distress, they were traumatized. So children may not fully understand what happened, but they feel the effects deeply. Their minds and bodies have a way of remembering these experiences, and that's where we come in as the adults in their lives. So whether we are a parent, whether we are we're just living in a community, we might not even be a parent, but we have other relatives who are children. It could be that we're in the church community and we operate in that space, where so all of us as adults, we have a responsibility, to help our children, because they would have just as how we would have experienced it, but they experience it in a bit differently, and we'll look at that somewhat a little bit further. So remember now, the trauma is a child's emotional response to this overwhelming event that would have taken place. So let us just explore the impact that Hurricane Melissa had on our children. So the trauma of Hurricane Melissa did not end when the storm passed. For children, the impact is ongoing. It is felt through, the displacement, the rebuilding, and the continued uncertainty. Melissa was not just a storm, it was a life-altering event. So when we think of loss of homes and schools, so children lost homes, schools, and church belongings. And when we look at it, when we saw it on the news, and for me, I have family members living in the Western End also, and family members who are from the Western End. And mighty God, I tell you, it was so devastating. So they have lost homes, property damaged, livestock. They have lost so much. They have lost the schools were closed because they were damaged. So it was very, very impactful on our children. There was separation from loved ones. Many children were separated from their family members during the disaster. We have, as I had gone into the Western End myself, and just to gather the stories and to give back in whatever way that we could as a family. And you hear of persons having to leave their homes and to run, to neighboring homes for help, for some safety. And so we got all of those stories. Our children were exposed to fear and chaos, because they were there witnessing the destruction, and the uncertainty leaves lasting emotional marks. And the reality of it is that there's ongoing stress. So you think of the displacement, having to leave home and to live in another space. You're not accustomed to that space. Can you imagine what has been happening to them? When we think about the rebuilding process and just the financial strain, some persons are out of a job because a lot of persons maybe rely on maybe farming. Some persons maybe rely on the hospitality industry. So a lot of adults were affected. They do not know, they don't have a job because, their farms could have been destroyed, or a lot of the hotels, as I passed through some areas, some hotels were closed because they have, even in recent times, they are still rebuilding, they're still having to rebuild. And so there's an ongoing stress, and it is real. And that is why we're here today, to see how best, we can pass on some practical steps to help you to alleviate the stress that our children might be facing. So how children process trauma differently from adults. So one of the things that we know is that children have limited vocabulary to express feelings like fear and grief and confusion. They don't have the words sometimes, and we're going to look at how we can help them to bring that out. So children show distress through behavior instead of words. Another thing, they depend heavily on adults for reassurance. So a lot of times, sometimes we don't remember the children, especially when things are so chaotic. We might forget the children, because in truth and in fact, we're focusing on, getting things back in order. We're focusing on doing some things to, to reinstate some semblance of normalcy. So I think that sometimes we might forget the children, but it's not deliberate. It's just because we are so taken up in trying to help to restore. And so, but we have to step back and to remember them, because the children depend heavily on us, and they're actually watching us. And even based on our reaction, based on, what we say, we have to be mindful even of our conversations on the phones. So that's something. So because they're looking to us. And we also have to know, we also know that children's reaction is vary by age and personality. Some children, yes, this has happened, but in truth and in fact, they're still doing well. They are affected, but it's not significant. And there are other children, they're so overwhelmed, they're so upset, they're constantly crying, all of those things. So children are different, and so they have different personality. So depending on the age, they will process the trauma differently. So one of the things that we're going to look at now is the signs of trauma-related distress in young children. And we're thinking of ages 0 to 5. Very young children cannot articulate fear or grief. Watch for behavioral and physical changes. Regression is common and temporary. It is a normal response to overwhelming stress. So some of the trauma-related distress that you might see, we'll now look at the emotional signs. So you could have increased crying, you could have clinginess, you could have fear of separation from the caregivers. So if you're walking around the house, they are your shadow. They're clinging to you. Everywhere you go, they're there. They could just be sometimes crying without you knowing. And you might say, what is wrong with you? So those could be, those are emotional signs that, the children, they're trying, this is a way of them just processing the distress. There could also be behavioral regression. So they might be, what might happen is like bedwetting, could be thumb sucking, a child who never sucked their thumb doing it now, or, so we see things like that. Or there could be returning to earlier developmental behaviors, maybe even creeping or something, like that. So even baby talk, they could go back to things like that. There's also sleep disturbances. They're screaming. In the nights they can't sleep for long periods as they would normally do. Their sleep is constantly interrupted. They're constantly getting up. They might have nightmares and crying out in the nights, and you possibly have to rush to them. In terms of the appetite, there could be loss of appetite, not eating as they would normally do. Or there could be changes in the eating patterns, not wanting, something as against something else, not wanting to eat early again, not wanting to have something. So there might be actually changes in their eating pattern. So let's just now move to the ages 6 to 12. So this is signs of trauma-related distress in school-age children. So older children may internalize or act out their distress. Signs often appear like at school or in social settings. So they might show anxiety and worry. And there might be excess concern about safety of self and family. And one of the things that I know about children is that they worry about their family members so much. I mean, sometimes they're so overwhelmed, and when you get to the bottom of the situation, it's just something to do with a family. Sometimes when you call the family, you realize that they might have just overheard a conversation or something. And so so children might become anxious, and they might worry to the point wherein they become, or they go into distress. They could also become irritable and angry. So they could have mood swings and outbursts, and increased conflict with peers or even their siblings. You might find some of that happening. There could be also school challenges, trouble concentrating. So they're looking out the window sometimes. So they're not focused, and the teacher might insist to say, John, why are you looking out the window like that? John, you're not concentrating, you're not focusing. All of those things, but actually their minds are just troubled. They could be worried about thinking about the storm and it coming back, or actually having flashbacks about what would have happened. So, and we'll look at in terms of how as caregivers we can, deal with those situations. So they might also, because of not concentrating and, not having the focus, in school, their performance might decline because they are actually missing out on what is being taught. You could also see signs of withdrawal, a child who used to play, not playing that much anymore, not playing at all. A child who used to very talkative, not talking so much anymore. All right. So we have to be looking out for those signs. We also have to look out for the ones who are generally not talkative, but no, because they're always quiet. We might overlook them. So even for them, we have to be mindful and we have to do our check-ins with them. So another thing that happens and with our school age children is that they might have physical complaints. They might say they might just be having constant headaches, stomach aches, or they might be replaying the event through their play and drawing. So if you see them outside playing with others, they're actually reenacting the event of what would have taken place. And so those are some of the signs of trauma-related distress in school age children. So some of the red flags that require extra support. So some children need more everyday support, right? So they're going to need more than that. And that's a fact. Some of them, yes. So some of the everyday support we give them, we hug them, we do all of those things, we reassure them that will be fine. But for some children, we are encouraging you to refer them to mental health professional when the following signs appear. So if any of the following signs persist beyond several weeks, and we're looking at maybe 4 weeks thereabout or more, it is persisting, it is intensified. Professional help is strongly recommended. So if distress does not ease after several weeks, then we have to now look at the fact that we have to refer out. If there's severe withdrawal or silence, so there's complete disengagement from people and activities, definitely, these are signs that, extra help is needed. If you're seeing them being very aggressive or there's self-harming behavior, so they're hurting themselves or others as an expression of pain, then, yes, we need extra help. If there's constant fear or panic, inability to feel safe, even in secure environments. So you have everything secure everything is in place. You would have returned to some semblance of normalcy, and yet your child or the child in question is still feeling unsafe and still feeling, insecure, on edge, that sort of thing. They're panicking, just for no apparent reason sometimes. So we have to now look at referring out. So there could also be a loss of interest in everything. So they don't want to engage in play. They don't want to eat. They don't even want to go to school. They're not showing any interest or energy towards school. And they were normally children who would go to, want to go to school and be very active, in school. And that's not happening anymore. So we now have to look at, this is a red flag, and we have to seek additional help. So as we move from that, what are some of the ways that, yes, we would have looked at the signs of, for children who are experiencing trauma-related distress. We look at the red flags, but what can we do? So one thing we're going to look at now is how can we provide emotional first aid and psychological support for our children? So firstly, let us look at what is emotional first aid, right? So emotional first aid is immediate compassionate support offered after distress. It is not therapy, mind you. It is simply human connection that helps stabilize a child's emotional state. So one, it gives safety. It helps the child feel physically and emotionally secure. So when you're there for a child, something has happened, something as major as Hurricane Melissa, no other time has we experienced this as a nation. So the children, would have become unsafe. But once you have that immediate compassionate support, you are there, you're present, you know, with the child, it will make a difference. Another element of it would be comfort, you know, offer warmth, you know, presence, and so reassurance without judgment. So that is what it means. So you could give them a hug. You could just be there for them, just standing beside them, holding them on the shoulder. If they say something, just, you know, assure them that it is well and it will be well. You know, so you're giving them this assurance, and you're not coming down on them in a judgmental sort of way. And then emotional first aid actually provides stability. So there's restoration of calm and predictability to the child's environment. And that is very critical, you know, at the outset. That is really, really critical for the child. It helps in ways that it is simple, but I must tell you, it is very, very effective. One of the things that I know, we did not experience the hurricane here. I'm in Kingston, as you know, as in the Western end. But some of our children were really affected by it because of what they saw online. And so we had to immediately provide compassionate support for them. We had to be present with them. We had to talk to them. We had to had group meetings with them to try to help them to understand what would have happened. We had to let them know that you know, the children on the Western end were being looked after. We had to talk them through the process. We had a situation where persons we did, you know, or did the drive to bring in all the things, and the children were so supportive of that, and just helping them to be a part of the process, in helping them to be a part of the restoration process. And so emotional first aid is critical. As I said, we did not get it directly, but we had to offer that support to our children here because of what they were seeing online and what was on the news. And we also had to ask that you know, parents limit the exposure to the news. So some of the core principles of emotional first aid. There are three simple actions that form the foundation of effective emotional support for children after disaster. One is for us to look. So it's a matter of observing signs of distress. So whether it's behavioral, it's physical, emotional changes that is signaling that signals that, or is signal, or would have, you know, signal that a child is struggling. So we have to be very, very observant and look out for the signs of distress. It could be behavioral, it could be physical, it could also be emotional. Now, another thing that we have to do is to listen. Be fully present and attentive. Let the child feel heard without rushing to fix or minimize their feelings. So we have to get them to express themselves. And we're going to look a little bit quickly at that somewhat. So we have to look, meaning we observe for the signs, whether it's behavioral, physical, or emotional. We have to listen, be fully present and attentive. You know, a lot of times, sometimes we dismiss our children. We're on the phone, we might, you know, they want us to express something, and we are saying, wait, we're saying, go, get away, you know, no. When they come to us, it's important. So we have to listen, and we have to show them that we are present. All right. Another thing is to link. We're going to now connect the child and family to support systems, resources, and professional help when needed. And my colleague will deal with that part of it in the next presentation. So the core principle of emotional support is to look, listen, and link. Okay, so we have offered the emotional first aid, right? We have examined the principles. One of the things that we have to do also is to create a sense of safety. So as we go forward in terms of giving this support, we have to create a sense of safety. And one of the things that we can do is to reassure our children verbally, let them know that you are safe. Simple, repeated assurance is powerful for children. Sometimes we might be thinking about we need something extraordinary. We need something more, but I kid you not. The simple things, you are safe. Remember, we're together as a family. I love you. We love you. We are here for you. Those are simple, reassuring statements that we can give to our children to help them to get to a place of feeling and having that sense of safety. We also have to maintain routines, predictable daily routines, restore a sense of normalcy and control. We have to be consistent care. We have to provide consistent caregiving. So stable, familiar adults help children regulate their own emotions. And we have to limit distressing media. And I'd mentioned that before. We have to be careful, what information our children are exposed to, because it's critical, because it affects them so much. It's something that we might not think much of it, but it is something that we need to be mindful of and limit, what our children's exposure to media. So how do we help children express emotion? Firstly, what to avoid. So we should avoid dismissing or minimizing their emotions. Telling children how they should feel. You should be happy when they're saying that, Mommy, I'm sad, Daddy, I'm sad, Auntie, I'm sad, Auntie, I'm feeling scared. What are you scared for? Everything, say everything all right. Rushing them to move on. You still feel sad? Get over that. No, reacting with alarm to their disclosures, because sometimes they might say something and we might be so alarmed. And so even as parents, we and teachers, guidance counselors, we have to be mindful of our reaction. And I give you a quick story. One day my son came from school and he told me something that I was shocked. I'll be honest, I was alarmed. And so the only thing it's so interesting that my husband and I were in the room together and he came to me and he said it to me, but my husband overheard and my husband said, "What?" And he said it loudly. And can you imagine a husband's voice? But luckily, when he said it to me, I was so alarmed that I could just hold him and I held him and I hugged him. And luckily I hugged him. So I think it kind of helped to buffer, when my husband said, "What?" Because he was shocked. I was shocked, but I could only draw him to me because I was so shocked. So sometimes in truth and in fact, our children will say something that is alarming, but we also have to be mindful of, our reaction to whatever they would have said, whatever they would have disclosed. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to encourage expression. So invite our children to talk, but never force it. So use play, use drawing and storytelling as an alternative outlet. Validate feelings openly. Let them know it makes sense to scare. You could also share that sometimes even as adults, we are scared. Sometimes we have our fears. But this is what we do sometimes when we are scared. So we could tell them, how they can breathe. One of the things that I do with my children, my little kiddos at school, I take them out and we blow bubbles. And it's very calming. You'll be surprised to know I blow bubbles so much. I blow bubbles to no end. Sometimes I have to go down to their level. So I go on my knees, bending down, and we're just blowing bubbles, and they're looking up and they're smiling and they're just playing, they're jumping and they're hitting the bubbles and they're hitting the bubbles and they're hitting the bubbles. Listen, that helps. It helps them. Another thing that I do, and I'm going to share with you quickly, I know my time is going. So I have my little finger puppets. So sometimes I use my little finger puppets. Let me see if I can get one quickly just to show it to you. So sometimes I use my finger puppets and I talk with them and I say, "So how are you feeling today?" So we do these little things and sometimes they can only fit on my little finger. So I said, "How are you doing today?" And I give them a finger puppet and they respond to me and they'll tell me. So we can do little things like this. So it's kind of, it lessens, what they're going through somewhat, because it's almost like they're speaking through the little puppets. So I do that sometimes with them and they're laughing sometimes. So play, sometimes you can draw, let them draw things. So how are you feeling? Draw how you're feeling, give me the face of that feeling that you have. Or so you put that feeling on paper, all right? And so things like that. Another thing we can do is storytelling, which is very, very interesting. So we could actually start a story. So begin a story with, there was a child who experienced a terrible storm, something like that. finish the story for those who are able to, and give them the puppets to finish the story, things like that. So there are different things, or give them a doll. So sometimes so we could have those little things, we could use them, and we are using this now to tell the story, and they're telling the story through the puppets, all right? Or the stuffed toy. So what to say and what to avoid. So we should stop. We have to choose language that validates, and reassures our children, and invite them, rather than shut them down. Invite them to talk, because then we'll know what is happening on the inside, and we'll be able to correct, and we'll be able to help. All right. So we have to just try to reassure them at all times. So phrases to avoid: tell them, stop crying. What are you crying for? Things like that. Be strong. More so if you're a boy. You're a boy. Be strong. Why are you crying? Others have it worse than you. Look at that, and you maybe draw some comparison. No, we cannot do that. You shouldn't be feeling that way. No, we have to invite them, let them know that it's okay to feel that way. All right. And then how is it that we can help them, to overcome whatever negative emotions that they might feel? So what are some helpful phrases that we can use? I am here for you. We're here for you. You're safe now. Tell me what you're feeling. It's okay to feel that way, because in truth and in fact, remember, even as adults, we have our feelings too. And yes, we're going through something. So it's okay, even in that moment, to feel that way based on what we would have gone through. Similar for the children. So we have to allow them to, share their feelings, and then bring it out and work with them to overcome those negative feelings. So practical support strategies as we try to wind down. Keep daily routines, so regular meals, sleep schedules, and school work, restore predictability. Encourage play and activity. Physical movements and play are natural stress relievers for children. Listen, go outside and play hopscotch. You should see me jumping at my age. Catch the ball. So I have my little stress ball, right? So sometimes we throw the ball, and when you catch the ball, you have to tell how you're feeling today and why are you feeling that way. All right. So we play with each other using our soft ball. Well, it's a stress ball. So physical, movements, beautiful, wonderful. Get them out there playing. It will help them to rest better, help them to get relieve the stress. Provide choices. Giving children small decision restores their sense of control. So sometimes there are little things that they can do. Say, for example, you generally read stories to them. Possibly what you can say to them is that, what storybook do you want to read tonight? So you give them, you don't select the book, you let them choose which one they want. So kind of restore that sense of control. Help them to, let them help you to set the table, find out what they want to eat today. Now, if it's a case where you only have two options, so you're thinking of two meat kinds. So you said, which of these you would want, and you let them select. So, mommy, I want chicken today. All right. So we're gonna do chicken today. So things like that. So you give them just small decisions, and it helps to restore the sense of control. I am a part of, that sense of also belonging, because I'm making a decision in my family. Another thing is to provide quality one-on-one time, dedicated, undivided attention, communicate safety and love. Sit down and talk with them, find out, no, they have gone back to school. We talk with them about how is school, what is happening, how are they feeling, what are some of the things they did today. Just probe, just ask those simple questions. You'll be surprised to know how much they unearth you. And so just be willing to sit down and listen and just, guide them along where needs be. But it's always good for them to feel, this sense of safety in when you're communicating with them, when you're present, you're there with them. You're not rushing, you're not looking on your phone. Sometimes you just have to turn off the phone. And sometimes another thing that as I remember, sometimes they want you to read the stories more than once. No, I know parents, that's a lot. They say, mommy, read it again, or daddy, read it again, or read it again. No, what you can do, what I normally do with my children, when they were at this stage, I would say to them, okay, I'm going to read it once, and then you would read it to me. No, I tell you something that happened is that at the time when my children were not at the age when they were reading, what I do, I let them read the pictures because I normally use picture storybooks. So I'd let them read the pictures. So I'd read the words and they would read the story using the pictures. So they read the story to me using the pictures. So we can do that. And it was very good, it was amazing what they came up with, creating their own stories. So that is something that we can also do as we seek now to put in place some strategies to help us as we move into, healing and recovery. And so how do we communicate with children about disaster? We have to be very careful. We have to use simple, age-appropriate language, be honest while providing reassurance, encourage children to ask questions, but also we have to correct misinformation calmly, listen actively and validate their feelings, let them feel accepted, affirm what they're saying, let them feel heard, avoid dismissing fears or rushing past difficult emotions because they're going to go through difficult emotions too. And so we can't just dismiss it or overlook it or say, no, you can't be experiencing that. Not at all. We cannot do that. We cannot dismiss their fears. So we also can limit distress in media, as was stated before, and reinforce safety. So reduce exposure to upsetting coverage and consistently reinforce available support system. And we will look into the support system a little bit later in the next presentation. So when to seek help. Everyday support is powerful, but some children need specialized care. Do not hesitate to refer when you observe the following: worsening symptoms, distress that intensify or persist over time rather than gradually easing, inability to function. So the children cannot manage basic daily activities, meals, sleep, or school. There's an impact on learning and relationships, or trauma visibly affecting academic performance or social connections. And if the caregivers are feeling overwhelmed, when you feel that you're unable to cope as a caregiver, you are to seek help, and that will be addressed a little bit later on. Just mentioning it in this slide. All right. So key takeaways as we wrap up: children feel deeply, even when they cannot express it clearly. Children experience disaster profoundly. Behavior, ladies and gentlemen, is communication. Acting out, withdrawal, and regression are always children say, I need help. Your presence is powerful. A calm, consistent adult is the single most important resource a child has. Nothing beats that. This is critical. Your presence, that assurance that you are there, and you are a consistent adult. You're calm, well-regulated, no matter what. All right? Small steps matters. So consistent everyday support makes a profound difference in long-term recovery. And so as we wrap up this presentation, I hope that you can take away something from it in terms of how can we better able to help our children. And so before we come to the very end, remember we had the activity earlier. No, I want you to think back. I'm trying. Let me just get my activities. So I want you to think back at the child that we looked at in the beginning. I want you now to focus on what happened next. Information is important, but what truly makes a difference is what we do with it. Think about that child that you had in your mind at the beginning of the presentation. I want you to write in the chat, what is one simple, meaningful thing you can do to better support this child emotionally? So just write one simple, meaningful thing that you can do to support that child emotionally. That child that you had in mind when we did the exercise at the beginning.
So we have listen, we have validation, we have listen more attentively, listen and be present, listen and validating, reassure them that you are there for them, giving them a hug, spend time, give support.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'm hearing listening more, giving more attention, validate them, listen and be present, reassuring them, spend time with them, giving support. All right, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, recovery is not just rebuilding homes, it's rebuilding hearts. Together, we can help children heal. Every parent, teacher, caregiver, counselor, and faith leader on this platform has the power to make a lasting difference. With presence, and somebody mentioned that, patience and compassion, we can help children feel safe, supported, and hopeful again. Thank you for showing up for the children of Western Jamaica. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the day.
So what we're gonna do, once again, thanks Nevin, we're gonna move into our other speaker. And our other speaker is Shantel Anderson-Williams. Shantel is a health and family life education teacher at the Little London High School, and that is in Westmoreland, and a lecturer at Bethel Bible College of the Caribbean Extensions, and is a minister of religion. She enjoys working with children and young people, helping them grow through education, guidance, and positive values. She is passionate about creating safe space and supporting spaces where children can learn, heal, and thrive. A quote that Shantel uses and goes by is, "Children are not things to be molded, but people to be unfolded." And this is from Jess Lear. Thank you, Shantel. You can take over now.
Right. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We are going to be looking at few more things as we pull this topic together. All right, so as was said before, my name is Shantel Anderson-Williams. All right, so as we start this evening, I want to just look at this quote right here. It says, "Hurricanes do not only affect buildings and roads, they also affect our hearts, minds, and emotions." So today, we're going to begin by sharing how we felt during and after the hurricane. So I have a poll here that is going to come up on your screen, and you're going to just respond to the poll. All right, so you should see it popping up. You're just going to respond to the questions. You can go ahead. All right, so we see a lot of persons saying they're feeling calm today, hopeful. All right, very good. Like the responses. Who plays the biggest role in helping children heal after disaster? All right. Many persons are sharing family. All right. I see some responses for school and church. All right. I give you about another minute just for those who haven't done the poll as yet to go ahead and respond and participate. All right. So we see that no one is anxious. Guess I'm the only one that's a little bit anxious or nervous here. No one is feeling overwhelmed. That is very good. So we have a lot of hope here this evening. All right. And I see that family played a big role in, our children healing from disaster. All right. Thank you all for participating in the poll. Thank you very much. All right, so what are we going to be looking at for this second half of the presentation? We're going to be understanding the emotional effects of the hurricane, support grief and loss in the children, explore the role of school, church, and community, preventing caregiver burnout, and also build resilience and coping skills. So these are our objectives for this evening that we hope that at the end of the presentation that you would have learned from the presentation. So children's behavior often tells us what their words cannot. When we respond with patience, understanding, and support, we help them move from fear towards healing and resilience. And I think that this encapsulates all that we want to say for this evening, that we really want our children to heal and to be resilient, to be better, than where they were before the hurricane. Now, as we explore from a psychological perspective, and Miss White went through some of these, but just to lay a little groundwork and also to emphasize a few things, you know, as we go forward. Hurricane can deeply affect the emotional well-being, especially in children. The fact that they may experience loss of home and belonging, separation from loved ones, fear and anxiety, change in their routine, as was said before, financial distress, and also emotional trauma, right? And I'm sure that some of the children, like this little girl on the screen here, would have been crying when they saw some of the things that happened in the time of Hurricane Melissa, and even any other disaster that may have occurred in recent times. So children would have may feel scared, sad, confused, and even unsafe after a hurricane. I can tell you that my daughter was very, very scared. I live in Westmoreland, you know, and after all the sounds that we heard, and you know, where we were at, and when we came out and we saw the devastation and the destruction, you know, at one point we when we were looking on the outside, we saw some men taking out our elderly neighbor from the front room to put her at the back of the house, because the front room was completely damaged with her on the inside. And even areas that we passed her in where, you know, pregnant mother would have passed away, and water reaching up as far as persons' breast and persons barricading their homes. And even after traveling and seeing all the trees and the devastation and no light and no water and all of that, yes, we understand that not only do adults experience such, but also children do experience the effects of any traumatic situation that they may experience. So emotional support, as was said before, reassurance and listening helps our children to recover, right? So when we're looking at, you know, grief, sometimes we think of grief as a loved one dying, and we say that's the only time we grieve. But that is not so. A person can grieve the loss of a phone. A person can grieve the loss of even a pet, right? As long as loss exists, grief can take place, right? So our children, not only do the parents suffer, but also the children also suffer from grief. And you may not see it as grief, but when you think about the signs and all that the children may pass through emotionally, mentally, physically, you'd realize that grief would have taken place, right? So as was said by Miss White, you know, the emotional signs, crying, fear, anger, frustration, withdrawal from others, physical sign, headache, stomach ache, you know, even when they are going to school, as we look at the school system, you know, they may say that their stomach is hurting them and they don't want to go to school. And, you know, all of a sudden there's a sickness that gets better when you say, okay, you don't have to go to school and so forth. So a lot of changes occurs for the children, and we have to be mindful of such, and also be careful how we push forward. So trouble sleeping, tiredness, clinginess, that's another one. In terms of behavior, poor concentration, as Miss White says, change in eating habits, aggressive behavior, thumb sucking, bed wetting, you know, fear of sleeping alone. I know that my daughter went through that for a couple of days, you know, the fear of being alone, you know, after the storm would have passed, and every little sound, you know, she would be asking, you know, Mommy, is it another hurricane? You know, so all of those feelings, you know, coming to pass or coming into play. So as was said before, listen calmly and patiently, allow children to express their feelings, reassure them that they are safe, keeping routines as normal as possible, encourage drawing, storytelling, and journaling. And Miss White would have gone into details where these things are concerned. So children grieve in stages, and healing is not always immediate. And if you think about as human beings, you know, when we lose something or we lose someone, in terms of the grief and the stages of grief, even to today, there are still some persons who grieve on Mother's Day, grieve on Father's Day, you know, grieve on different occasions and different times because of a certain loss that they would have experienced at such a time. So just imagine the children who are not able to express, you know, these feelings. Sometimes the world goes on and our children are stuck still at the loss of the house, at the loss of their favorite pet, you know, at the loss of even learning, because we would understand that because of Melissa, some of the in terms of education, you know, it would have been pushed back a little. And remember, we just came off COVID and burial and so forth. So it has been a lot that our children of today would have been faced with. So when we see certain behavior, you know, when we see them acting up, you know, we should not push them aside. We should validate, we should encourage our children to express themselves in a healthy way, right? And these are some of the ways, as Miss White would have said, you know, but I also want to emphasize prayer and devotion. You know, that is also key. You know, prayer gives them a sense of hope, right? And devotion gives them a sense of hope that God will take care of things. And don't be afraid to share the little blessings with them. You know, as much as they go through the trauma, you know, ensure that you let them know that, you know, the Lord would have opened certain doors, probably for your roof to go on, probably for you to get some windows, some sheets of zinc and so forth, so that they, you know, will know that in spite of the darkness, there is still light at the end of the tunnel, right? So we look at the 3 R's: recognize the signs of trauma, respond with patience, support, and reassurance, and refer for professional help when symptoms persist or worsen. So what should you do if you see certain symptoms, as we have said, and once you see them consistently over several weeks, you know that you seek help for the children or the child. Sometimes we do not want to seek help for them because we say nothing is wrong with them. Oh, he's just angry. Or, you know, as some persons would say, the child doesn't have anything to be angry about, doesn't have anything to stress over. But gone are the days when we say such phrases, because in times like this, we realize that our children are very in touch with their feelings, right? And a lot of times they are unable to express such. So how can we help from a school perspective, church perspective, and even community perspective? So school provides stability, right? So while some of the schools, you know, may have lost the roof and buildings and so forth, the fact that they can go to school, it gives a level of stability to their lives. So at least that has not changed. Church provides hope and spiritual support. Community provides connection, care, and recovery assistance. So when we talk about school can help children recover by providing stability and routine. So allow them to go to school, at least maintain that routine of going to school. Yes, offer emotional support. The schools can offer emotional support, encouraging peer relationship, creating safe space for discussion, connecting with families through the council and other support groups. You know, at my school where I'm teaching, we allow the students to come in their clothes, you know, because we understand that many of them would have been impacted by Hurricane Melissa, and so they do not have their uniforms. All their uniforms are damaged or destroyed or even lost. Yes, so they would come in their clothes. And even as we have now moved to some semblance of normalcy, if a child comes in clothes, we do not turn them away, because we understand that not everyone is on their feet as yet. Not everyone is able to buy the new uniform and so forth. And even where lunch is concerned, we do provide lunch for the children who come. So schools are supposed to provide that sense of stability. And even with peers, we encourage, peers to look out for each other. I remember this young man in my form class, he has been through a rough time, Hurricane Melissa, and then his grandmother passed and so much, and so many other things. And I remember when I was talking to the group of them, and I said to his friends, you need to ensure that you reach out to him. You guys can't just be friends, to talk about girls and all of these things, but look out for each other. Recognize when each other is having a down moment, right? And so that when you see that, don't just keep it to yourself, but reach out to a staff member, reach out to the guidance counselor who is always readily available and so forth. And encourage your children to utilize their guidance counselors. I know a lot of children don't like to go to guidance counselors, but encourage your child, if they have found themselves in any level of difficulty, to seek help, right? So teachers can show patience and understanding. I had to do a lot of this as I teach at a high school. So I had to show a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, especially some of the days when the children come and they don't want to do any work. I have to find out what is happening, and they may say to me, Miss, we don't have any light, and the place torment and me bored and all of those stuff. Now I cannot say to them, I saw life go, or I cannot say to them, a foolishness here they tell me. No, I have to empathize with them. I have to be understanding, this is a change. And if we know anything about people, we know that people do not like changes, right? Even we ourselves here online, we don't like changes that much, right? So it's the same thing with the children. So watch out for the emotional warning signs. I had to recommend a lot of them to the guidance counselor. Some of them would talk about killing themselves. Some of them would talk about, running away. And we have had so many of that in recent times. Children want to just run away. Where you plan to go? They don't have any idea, but they just feel like they want to run away, right? Encourage participation and hope. In terms of church provides spiritual encouragement, prayer, and emotional support. It's important that you go to church. It's important that you carry the children to church. Let pastor pray for them. Let the deacon pray for them. Church provides also food and shelter for some persons. I know in the time of Melissa, a lot of churches were giving away food stuff and also sheltering persons, counseling and mentoring. If you don't want to take up the guidance counsel, you can seek your pastor's assistance in terms of counseling the child. And I just want to say that a lot of times, our children experience different signs and symptoms even before Melissa. They were showing certain things like anger and frustration and irritation and so forth. And sometimes we as parents, we ignore that, and we sometimes we push it off, or we push it aside. So Melissa came, and now it has gotten out of hand. I want to say to us, seek the necessary help for our children. Don't be afraid of counseling. Embrace it. It's an arm of healing, right? So hope during difficult times. So church will help them to feel connected, comfort, build courage and hope in the time. Even after Melissa, I had to connect with my youth group and find out what's happening with them and children and how are they feeling, and those who lost their homes and so forth, reach out to the children. As much as I reached out to the parents, I took into consideration that the children may be feeling some way or particular way. So I ensure that I reach out to the children also and have a little rap session with them, a little downtime so that they can just relax. Also for communities can show support through healing, through community cleanup activities, support groups, donations and food drives, youth activity, family outreach, You know, strong communities help families feel less alone, promote teamwork and recovery, and encourage hope and unity. You know, I remember at one point when we were giving out the stuff that we got to the community, you know, it brought about a level of fellowship. You know, persons came down and they sat in the church and we would reason and we would talk and they would share things with me and so forth. And then when it's cleanup time, the church would go, members of the church would go and help with the cleanup. So it bonds people together. And one of the things I realized, even in the time of Melissa, you know, it bond family together, because even in the time when, you know, we didn't have any light, some of us would have play our little domino and play our little ludi, you know, with our children, and even sit down and have conversation, you know, because some of us may not be going to work as often as we used to. So it allowed us to have a lot of family time. And I think that was very good. So there's a downside to it, but there's also an upside to it. I think that was very good, you know, building, promoting, you know, healthy families and stronger families for it. I, for one, had a wonderful time with my daughter at the time and my son, in terms of building a rapport and, you know, just talking about everyday things and, you know, playing our ludi and playing our card pack when there was no light, and we'd sit on the veranda and shine a little solar light and, you know, we just enjoy ourselves. You know, now that life is back to some normalcy, we don't get to do that as often, you know, because we have school and we have work and so forth. So, but it was good. So let's talk about you. We have talked about the children. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about us. Yes. So while we support our children, while we encourage our children, you know, while we seek to ensure that our children get the best support and the best out of life, you know, we have to also think about ourselves. Yes, caregivers need rest. Can I say that again? We need rest and emotional support, because as caregivers, we can experience stress and exhaustion. Yes, we're taking care of everybody else and we are not taking care of ourselves. We will become burnout. And some of us, we were even burned out before, you know, Hurricane Melissa, because of work and busy schedule and having to be here, there, and everywhere. You know, so Melissa came and it made it worse. So what are some of the signs of it? Constant tiredness. Even though you are moving, you're always tired. Irritability, feeling overwhelmed. You too can have difficulty in sleeping and loss of motivation. Sometimes we as adults can feel so drained, right? And that's a sign of leading into being burnout, or you're already burnt out. So we have to be very careful of that. So as adults, rest when possible. I know that, you know, sometimes we have to take care of the entire household, and then we take care of ourselves. But when we can rest when possible, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Can I say that again? You cannot pour from an empty cup. If the cup is empty, you cannot pour anything out of that. So rest when possible, eat healthy meals, share responsibility, learn to delegate, learn to ask for help. My Lord, in our Jamaican society, that's one of the hardest things for some of us to do, because we're so independent, which is learn to ask for help. Sometimes send the kids to grandma's house, send them probably to auntie's house for probably an hour or two, you know, and allow yourself to just rest. Probably watch a movie, just relax your mind for a little bit. Talk to supportive friends or families. Yes, talk about it. You know, some persons don't believe that talking helps, but bottling everything on the inside does not help. Talking helps. So talk. Yes. Communicate with persons. Pray or meditate. Take short breaks. And again, ask for help when needed. Do not leave yourself out there. Ask for help. So we have, not only do we talk about caregivers, but we have what is called secondary traumatic stress that some of us may go through. We may not necessarily have been impacted by Hurricane Melissa. However, we have some of the residues from it, right? So by listening to the stories and even by passing through some communities, there are even communities today that still has not gotten back light as yet, right? Are still without electricity and so forth. There are still houses that are still damaged. Yes, no work has started on it. You know, there are still persons who are in shelter. So sometimes when you hear these stories, if you are like me, where your heart will be touched, you know, you can be overwhelmed by this. So we call it secondary traumatic stress. So it happens when a person becomes emotionally affected by hearing about or supporting others who have experienced trauma, loss, or even disaster. So how does it happen? It happens, as I said, when we listen to painful stories, you know, when we're supporting grieving families. And I know that a lot of help came from Kingston and Portmore and all of the parishes that were not so much affected by Melissa. I know that you would have come down to Westmoreland and Hanover and all of these places, and you have given your support in terms of food supply and even counseling, right? So some of that can be a lot on you as an individual. So you have to be careful. Witnessing suffering and loss, handle emergency repeatedly, right? So these are some of the ways that we can, you know, have secondary trauma. So it's important that we acknowledge if we are overwhelmed, you know, by the stories, if we're overwhelmed by what we see or what we hear. It's important to acknowledge it as any situation that you may in, as any crisis that you may be a part of. It's important that you do not ignore such. Yes, it can lead to burnout, it can lead to depression, it can lead to poor physical health. You know, and sometimes we go to the doctor and doctor say, I cannot find your complaint. Why? You know, because it's not something physical. A lot of times it is something mental, right? We need to cater to our mind, take that rest, take that break. So reduce ability to care for others and also emotional disconnect. So healthy caregivers are better able to support children and families. So recognize your emotional limits. Know when to say no. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Yes, sometimes we are taking care of others and we don't think to take care of ourselves, but it is a necessary step if you want to survive. So recognize your emotional limits. There are times when I'm talking to somebody on the phone and I have to say, I have to go now, or I'm going to do something because I have emotionally tapped out of the conversation. Too much information, overload, and I need to take a break. Now, some persons will continue to listen because probably you will say to yourself, you don't want anybody to feel away, but you must know your limit. And when that limit comes, you need to take your rest. Set boundaries, ask for help early, practice self-compassion, love yourself, take time to recover emotionally. You see those ladies in the groups there, you know, doing a little yoga, right? They are relaxing themselves, enjoying. You see that smile? When was the last time some of us smile like that? You know, or just relax like that. Take a break, take a vacation, go somewhere, go and eat something, you know. Just take some time for yourself just to heal and recover. Now, in building resilience, we want the children to learn how to adapt, to recover, and to continue functioning after a stressful or traumatic experience. So when we take care of ourselves, we are now able to take care of our children because we are now able to help them to recover. So children will build such resilience through supportive relationship, positive encouragement, problem-solving skills, faith, and hope, opportunity to help others, and a safe and loving environment, which is very, very important. Providing a safe and loving environment, an environment where we don't discriminate, an environment where we don't think your thoughts are foolish, an environment where we strive to build hope with our children. So what are some of the things we can do as caretakers and even with our children? Some deep breathing exercise, prayer and reflection, as was said before, talking about our feelings. This one is a very hard task. Some of us, we don't We don't really talk to our children, right? Rather talk to the adults. But sometimes talking to our children about what is happening, sometimes our children know us more than even we know ourselves, because they can identify when we are sad. They can identify when we're happy. They can identify when mommy is in a good mood, because that's the time when they come and you hear, mommy, and you know what is coming next. Can I get banana chips, or can I get some of the cornflakes? That's true. Right? So, and they know when not to come to us. So they test the water, and when they say mommy, and they realize certain things, they say, no bother. It's all right, right? And then gone. So they know our feelings, and they know what we are experiencing, and they see the sadness, they see the tears. Yes, or they even hear it sometimes in the night when we go to our little corners and we may cry because of the financial strain and how we are feeling and so forth. So it's important that we have clear communication with them, and talk about some of the things and help them to process things as we also process things, right? Not just sweep it under the covers. Physical activities and sports, as Ms. White said, play some activities, some sports with them, art and music, and just spend some time with your loved ones. All right, so we're gonna just take a minute or two, and you're gonna just listen to me, and we're gonna just do an activity. All right, so we are going to inhale. You're going to take a deep breath with me, and you're going to exhale. I hope that we're doing it. I'm not seeing you on screen, but I am trusting you. So you're gonna inhale again for me, and exhale. You're going to inhale peace and exhale the worry. My God, relax the shoulders, man, this evening. Some of you are so tense in the face. Just relax. Inhale again and exhale. Inhale joy. Yes, man. Let out the frustration. Inhale love, the love of God. Exhale any worry that you may have. He says, cast our cares upon him because he cares for us. Now you're going to use your imagination as you inhale and exhale. We're going to take a little walk. And you're inhaling and you're exhaling. Picture yourself on the outside. Wow. Feel that nice breeze. You're relaxing, man. Let go everything. Let go what you're going to do after this. What happened to you this morning. You're just relaxing and you're taking a nice little walk. Picture yourself coming up on a little river or sea. I don't know which one you like. And you are taking a deep breath. Wow. And you are relaxing. You're taking another deep breath. And you are relaxing. One more time. Take a deep breath. Wow. And exhale. All right. You can open your eyes. I hope that we feel a little bit more relaxed. All right. Awesome. So that was a deep breathing exercise, right? To just get us to relax. And there's so much more online that you can also research. So if you need help or assistance with your children, where can you go? You can go to the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, which provides counseling, family support, yes, child protection services, and trauma responses for families and children affected by the disaster, the violence, or displacement, anyone. So you can go to CPFSA. You can also go to the Office of the Children's Advocate. They assist in protecting children's rights and can provide guidance when children need intervention or support. You can also visit your local clinics. How many of us know that local clinics offers counseling? Yes, they do, for both adults and children, and it is free of cost. So you can check that out. Guidance school counselors, as I said, child protective services, and also faith-based and emergency services. So together we can heal and rebuild as we wrap up by supporting one another. Compassion, patience, faith, understanding, community support. Families can overcome the emotional impact of Hurricane Melissa. And we close with this. Even after storms, hope can grow again. Together, we can heal, rebuild, and support one another. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation and you would have learned something. Let us just pause for prayer. Father, we thank you again. We honor you for everyone that is online. Lord, you know the different difficulties, you know what they are passing through. And even if they are not passing through hurricane effects, Lord, or residue, but something else is affecting them and they are seeking help. Lord, we pray that they will utilize the services offered. We pray even now for healing. Lord, while we endorse counseling, we also endorse Christ with the counseling. Father, we pray a divine coverage over everyone online. We pray for strength and we pray for healing. We pray even now, Lord, that you strengthen them beyond their measure. Lord, some doors that were closed, oh God Almighty, will you begin to open them? We pray, God, that you will just surround your people and you will just let this be a beneficial session to them, not just to them alone, but everyone that they may come in contact with. We bless you and we honor you and we tell you thanks. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen and amen. God bless you. Thank you for listening.